Hey everybody, how's it going? So, a friend of mine who is an aspiring scientist sent me a link to a video. I actually think it's a very well done video, and I'm not looking to criticize the video at all. Rather, I'm looking to answer my friend's question. What she asked me when she sent me a link to this video is why don't people seem to listen to science when it comes to creating policy? She's always kind of curious about that. She is in favor of policy that listens to science. And one of the things that I'll often have to explain to her is that people do actually listen to science. They can even listen to and believe the science. However, when you're making policy, you then have to take that science and sell it to your population. And this is something that's much easier said than done. So policy is going to be a law that dictates how people go about and live their lives. And in order to create sound policy, you need to have the buy-in of the population. To have the buy-in of the population has to understand the reasoning behind it and believe that the reasoning is fair and just. If they don't believe that, the chances are that they're not going to actually listen to the policy, meaning that the policy itself is useless and you're going to get kicked out of office. So not only is the policy not going to actually achieve its stated goal because you are not able to get buy-in from the population, which is necessary for the policy to be successful, but you're also going to get kicked out of office. Best case or worst case scenario, maybe a bunch of pitchforks show up outside your house, which that just really isn't good for anybody. So here I'd like to talk a little bit about the Sturgis motorcycle rally and the protests. Now, I'm not going to be picking sides here politically. I'm not going to be saying whether I think you should or shouldn't be protesting. I'm not going to say whether I think you should or shouldn't be attending rallies. I'm not getting into that at all. I want to be very clear here that all I want to focus on is why I believe it is more difficult than people make it sound to create policy based on science, even if you believe in the science and even if you believe it is correct. Now, one thing I'd like to ask as a favor, because this happens anytime you discuss a touchy subject, what I find is that people respond to what they think you said or to what they think you think, rather than responding to what you said. So I would ask as a favor, just do me this one favor this video. Well, actually two favors. A, if you don't want to listen to something that you think is a touchy subject because it'll make you mad, hit the X button. And B, respond to what I said rather than what you think I said or what you think I think. Now, that being said, let's get into the video. I'm going to play the video that she sent me, and then I'm going to play some of my thoughts as we go along. And I'm going to try to explain why I think it is considerably more difficult than people give politicians credit for to come up with policy based on science.
Guys, Ben Shapiro's confused. I mean that in general, but also specifically he is confused about a recent study that found that this year's Sturgis motorcycle rally was a super spreader event that led to a huge uptick in COVID-19 cases. About 260 cases directly tied to Sturgis had been detected as of September 2nd, according to the Washington Post, Shapiro tweeted. And I'm going to have to hear some answers on why Sturgis, 400,000 attendees, was more of a spreader than BLM marches that drew a reported 40 times that number. Well, hey, if Ben Shapiro demands some answers, I am more than happy to help. Normally, I think that a team of medical professionals is necessary to deal with Ben Shapiro's problems, but he's confused about a scientific study? I'm here to help. Shapiro is replying to a new study published by the Institute of Labor Economics titled The Contagion Externality of a Super Spreading Event, the Sturgis Motorcycle Rally and COVID-19, which estimated that in the month following the rally, 266,796 new cases of COVID-19 could be traced back to the event, which makes up about 19% of all new cases in the United States during that period studied. Those are huge numbers, and in a bit I'll talk about why they might not be quite right. But first, let's talk about Ben Shapiro and why he doesn't think they're right. To counter this research, Shapiro references a Washington Post article from 5 days prior, which did in fact state that at least 260 cases could be linked to Sturgis. They say they got that figure by surveying various health departments, and then they qualify the figure in the very next sentence. Epidemiologists believe that figure is a significant undercount due to the resistance of some rallygoers to testing and the limited contact tracing in some states. As a result, the true scope of infections stemming from the rally that ran from August 7th to August 16th is unlikely to ever be known. It's worth noting Sturgis had 460,000 attendees, and that Washington Post article Ben Shapiro cites stated 260 cases and one death resulted from it. Compare that to a wedding in Maine recently that had 65 attendees and has thus far resulted in 147 cases and 3 deaths. So, yeah, when they say that there's probably a significant undercount there, they're not kidding. So, this new study did not merely survey random health departments. Instead, the researchers used anonymized cell phone data to track what counties people were traveling from to attend the rally. They found that in counties with the largest relative inflow to the event, the per 1,000 case rate increased by 10.7% after 24 days following the onset of Sturgis pre-rally events. They also found that the county where Sturgis itself occurred experienced a dramatic increase in their own caseload. Of course, Ben Shapiro would never rely entirely on the reporting of the Washington Post to combat a rigorous scientific study, so let's look at his other objection. I'm going to have to hear some answers on why Sturgis, 400,000 attendees, was more of a spreader than BLM marches that Drew reported 40 times that number. First of all, allow me to point out, again, Sturgis was 462,000 people, not 400,000. Second of all, no Black Lives Matter protest drew a reported 40 times that number. That would be 18 million people. That would be nearly the entire population of New York State at one protest. Sturgis was a single event in which 462,000 people converged in a city that's about 6 square miles, which usually holds about 7,000 residents. No Black Lives Matter protest has even come close to those sorts of numbers. Still, Black Lives Matter protests have definitely drawn tens of thousands of people. Why have none of those been considered a super spreader event? Well, had Shapiro taken the time to click the link in the tweet that he is replying to, he would have found all of the answers he was looking for in this very helpful, full, free PDF of the study in question. Not only does the paper describe in detail the perfect storm of idiocy that led to Sturgis being a disaster, but it also references a previous study published in June by the same researchers, which found that no Black Lives Matter protest up until that point has led to any increase in COVID-19 cases. So first, let's talk about Black Lives Matter. In the study, Black Lives Matter Protests, Social Distancing, and COVID-19, published by the National Bureau of Economic Research, the researchers looked at protests of at least 1,000 people in 286 of the largest American cities, most of which continued their protests for more than 3 days at a time. They found absolutely no increase in COVID-19 cases following any protest in any city. But why? The researchers acknowledge that it's likely the protesters wore masks, reducing the chances that they would be infected. And they were also young and healthy and therefore less likely to report symptoms if they did catch COVID-19. And if you look at photos from the events, you do see some pretty decent compliance with wearing masks. But photos don't give us the entire story. It's a very difficult thing to study.
Now, let's assume this is 100% correct, that the protest had people attending them that were considerably younger than the people going to the Sturgis motorcycle rally. I checked out a couple of them on YouTube. The Sturgis motorcycle rally actually looks like a lot of fun. It's something that I'd want to attend someday once I get a real motorcycle that can actually make it all the way to South Dakota. The people there seemed, on average, a little bit more elderly than the population people that go to protests. Again, I live in New York City. I've seen a lot of the protests, and I really am not trying to be insulting here, but looking at the motorcycle rally, it seems like the people there look about one full generation above the average person attending a protest. Now, you have to think here. This is about how do you turn science into policy. Policy needs to be accepted by people. You cannot come up with policy if more than 50% of the population is not going to obey it, because then it's pointless. So if you come up with a policy that says, well, we're going to allow the protest, but we're not going to allow the motorcycle rally because the motorcycle rally itself has older people, which are on average unhealthy going, so we need to protect you from yourself. We don't need to protect them from themselves, but we have to protect you old geezers from yourself. You're probably not going to have a lot of compliance, and as a politician, in addition to not having compliance, you're also going to be voted out, which means you're not going to have the power to make these decisions into the future. Because if you have to think about this, if someone says, "Listen, they're allowed to go outside because they're young, they're healthy," you with your motorcycle and your RBs and you're being over 55, I mean, no, we can't have that. You're probably not going to get a lot of compliance, even if the science says that this is going to affect the elderly more than the young, and even if science there becomes irrelevant because you then need to sell this. That's what being a politician is. It's selling the policy to people in a manner that gets them to comply.
But just like in their Sturgis study, these researchers were able to study the anonymized cell phone data that tracked people's movements and gauged their social distancing. And what they found was that when a protest happened in a city, the residents of that city were more likely to stay home and be socially distanced. So even if the protesters themselves were spreading the virus to one another, the people who were not protesting were more likely to not spread the virus. And in the end, these researchers found that it all balanced out to a point where a protest was even slightly likely to lead to a decrease in new cases in the city that the protest was happening in.
This is honestly my favorite part of the entire study. I'm going to assume that what is being said here is 100% correct. I'm not going to dispute any of the data. But wow, good luck selling that to people. Okay, see, you don't understand. When there's a protest, people stay home. Why they stay home, we're not going to ask them. We're not going to survey them because I don't want to lose my job. But when you guys go out to your motorcycle rally, people actually want to show up because you're friendly and you're nice and they want to see what's going on. And because you guys are so friendly and people want to go out of their home and see what's going on, we can't have that. But when the protests happen, they encourage people to stay home. So you guys can go out as much as you want. Man, good luck selling that to anybody. Again, even if the science, this is one of the things that Eli, the computer guy, has said. You could be 100% right and 100% fired all at the same time. It's an excellent video on his channel, and I suggest you watch it. And the same thing kind of seems to be true with science here. Your science could be 100% correct, and you can also be 100% fucked trying to sell this to your population at the same time. So let's say that when a protest happens, more people stay indoors than go outside for whatever reason that apparently they never surveyed in the study because they want to keep their jobs. And when the motorcycle rally happens, people are like, wow, we want to go see the motorcycle rally and go outside. How do you sell that to people? Do you say, well, listen, how do you sell that to someone in a manner where they want to listen to you? So, listen, you guys can't have your motorcycle rally because of COVID. Well, what about the protests? Well, you don't understand. When the protests happen, it actually causes people to stay inside their house. So that causes people to be more socially distant, so we can let that happen. Wait, so they're getting people to stay inside their house. They're getting people to stay inside their house, so they're allowed to go outside and we can't because people actually want to come out and meet us? Well, yes. That politician is most likely not going to be in office next term. That politician may have some pitchforks outside of their house, within a day of making that announcement. I'm not saying it's right or wrong. I'm just saying that the reality of selling that science to the average population, good luck with that. I wish you the best of luck selling that to your population. And this is why when people say, why can't we have policy based on science, whether you like it or not, I'm just saying, I'm asking the question, how would you, as a politician who is elected by the people, chosen by the people, going to sell that to your local population? How would you go about explaining that in a manner that doesn't have you voted out of office at best case or, pitchforked worst case?
So for Ben Shapiro's sake, let's compare that directly with what happened in Sturgis, according to this new paper. Unlike the protests, the residents of Sturgis were not more likely to stay at home during the rally. In fact, their cell phone data indicates that they were more likely to go out of their home to participate in all of the fun events that were happening, like Smash Mouth concerts. Of course, even if those residents had been more likely to stay at home, that probably wouldn't have balanced out. Black Lives Matter protests involved a fraction of the total population of a city, while Sturgis involved 66 times as many attendees as there were living in the city. Add to that the fact that Sturgis attendees were not wearing masks regularly. They were also inside a lot, crowding into bars and restaurants. They were also specifically there to socialize, which requires speaking directly to another person for an extended period of time, as opposed to a protest where if you're shouting, it's out into the ether and not necessarily at someone else's face.
I think this would be the best point to try and sell people on, which is that A, you have way more people than they do. Listen, you guys are so popular. You've got over 400,000 people showing up. They've only got like 5 or 10,000. They're not that popular, but you guys are really popular. And because you're really popular, that presents a problem. Now, maybe we could do this differently, where we have different rallies, or we cut it up into, only this amount of people can show up per day or something. But because you guys are so popular, that's why we're focusing on it. If you focus on the other parts of the study, again, I wish you the best of luck in doing that and not getting a pitchfork up your ass if you're a politician. But if you focus on this point, I think you actually have a chance of getting some sort of policy that may contain the spread of coronavirus a little bit out to the population a little better. Maybe you have something where you say, listen, we can't have indoor events, but we can have outdoor events. But again, even when she mentions the fact that people were screaming, they were not, at a protest, you're screaming out into the ether, not into people's face. If you take a look at some of these pictures, you'll see that the protests are actually fairly close together.
And here's a fun tidbit. In addition to the irreparable damage done to human lives and general health and well-being, this being an economic paper, they also found if we conservatively assume that all of these cases were non-fatal, which we know is untrue, at least one person has already died, then these cases represent a cost of over $12.2 billion. This is enough to have paid each of the estimated 462,182 rally attendees $26,553.64 not to attend. Wow, I hope that Smash Mouth concert was worth it.
Remember, my focus with this video is the intersection of science and politics, where we discuss how it is you create policy from science. So even if that figure is correct, and how would you turn that into policy? Even if not for this pandemic, even for the next one, would you say if there is a large event and you don't know how many people are going to go or who is going to go, that we're going to pay you X dollars to not go? Because if you do that, then you're going to have a lot of people that say, I was going to go so that they can get the payout. And I know you may think, well, that's not what they mean, but you have to understand, they included it there. And if they included it there, I do have to ask the question, what is the point of including that they could have paid this out to everybody who showed up if that is not like something that's actually on the table?